Hi, this is Andrew. Thanks for joining me. This video covers is video 2 in the series of Python basic programming. We covered variables in video 1. If you haven't watched that, go back and take a look. Now we're going to talk about lists in video 2. So we have, as we talked about in video 1, x equals 43. That's a variable. We're assigning the number 43 to x. And we can print that out by doing print x. And now we can do an F5 and say, there we go. We have, we're printing out the result. Now, what if it's not x we want? What if we want student IDs? So I do student, and I'll do ID 1, and I'll make that some number, and then I'll just keep Control-C, and I'll copy and paste and change those numbers a little bit. So now I have 5 student IDs saved, except I want to do them in number order. 3, you can already see how this doesn't work well. 4 and 5, and obviously the IDs need to be different, so I'll just increment them 4, 4, 5, 4, 6, and 4, 7. So I have these IDs. I no longer have a print x, and I just created, in this case, 5. In my example in the slide, I have 3. This isn't the most efficient way to create them or store them. Now I have these 5 separate variables, and if I had 1,000 separate variables, whatever it is, it's not a good way to do this. So what I can do instead is say I'm going to create student ID, and instead of listing a number, I'm going to use a bracket, and I'm going to put these numbers into a bracket. So I do, in this case, I'll copy, and I'll just do paste and 4, comma, and I'll do comma to separate them. I do comma to separate them, and I do 5 and 6 and 7. And, a little clumsy in typing it, but ultimately it worked, and I put those 5 variables into a single place. Now, the single place is what makes it really useful. So what I can do with that, and in the next video we'll get into more advanced things we can do with that, but what I can do right now is I can say I want to print out print student underscore ID. And if I run that, I will get all of the IDs printed out. Single command runs, prints everything out. Now, that's not always what we're looking for. What I might want is, and if you're reading ahead, you'll see kind of the trick there. I'm going to change these IDs just to make them a little more intuitive. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just so you can see, when I print it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if I only want to print out one of them, I can say I'm going to print out, and I can put the positional indicator right here. So I do student ID and 1. And if you're not reading ahead, you might think the number it's going to print out is 1. But actually, the number it prints out is 2, because computers count from 0. So the first position is 0. The second position is 1. So that is an easy mistake to make, an easy thing to mix up. And when you've done it 200 or 300 times, you just start to remember these things. So with that said, these lists don't need to be numbers. We can say I want to have a list of names. And let's clean this up and start over, and I'm going to say I have names, and in my names I'm going to store strings. If you remember from last time, we can do quotes, single quote or double quote. I'll do Rob and then Gus and comma and Millie and Kay. Ooh. So now I have names, and if I want to print out name, now here's an easy mistake to make, and I did it in my slide. The variable is not called name, it's called names. So it's names. My position I want to print out is 2, and if you think about that, it's going to print out the 0, 1, 2, the third name there, Millie. So if I do that, I print it out, I get Millie, which apparently I spelled wrong because I was not paying attention. There we go. Let's fix that. So that positional indicator, that's called the index. Now that doesn't need to be a number. That can be based on a variable. I can do x, but I would need to define x. So I do x is equal to 2. X equals 2, and I can run that again. And now it's Millie again. So now if I switch back to my here and I say x equals 3, and I can run that, and now I get the 4th position, and that's K. So we are now working with this list, and we can work with the names that are in there, and at this point all we're doing is displaying names. We're displaying things that are in the positional indicator or the index. What if we want to add a name to the list? If I go back here and I do, after that I'll do names dot append, and the append is adding, and I'll say what do I want to add. I do same process. I can do quotes, and I'll do Laura here, and then I can do print names. Names, and I'll print out the full list. So if I do an F5 on this, that K was from the earlier command, and now I have a list with 5 names in it. Now let's say I decided I didn't want all those names, and I want to delete one of them. I'm going to delete 4, which is the last one I added. That's the Laura name. So now I can do del, and I'll do names, and I'll do the index of that one, and then if I print names again, I will see that I print out the list with the name added, and then I deleted the name and it's gone. So there's another thing we can do to delete names, and instead of delete names, I'm going to use the pop command. I'm going to do names.pop, and I'm going to do, instead of deleting that name, I'm going to put it somewhere else. I inadvertently put it into names, and I want to put it into something called sister names. So now that's names.pop, and then I will come down here and print sister name. So when I run this, and let's make sure we can see fully what's happening. Okay, that's printed out because I printed names and the third position. 0, 1, 2, 3 is K. Then I added Laura to the list, and that prints out the full names with Laura. Then I said, I want to take whatever was put in that list last, and I'm going to pop that into the sister name. So it deletes it from the list, and it puts it into that sister name variable. And this could be named anything. It could be Y, it could be whatever. I'm just using a descriptive name. Then when I print out the list, I see the list that I had minus that last one that I added. And now I have sister name Laura. So if I wanted to do it again, instead of saying doing it that way. If I do it this way and I put the second position indicator 0, 1, 2, we can see that now instead of removing Laura, it removed Millie from the list and put that into sister name. That's not correct, so I will go back and fix that. And we're back to where we were. So there are other functions we can do. I can say I want to remove Laura from the list, so I can do names remove and then put Laura in. So instead of sister names.pop, let's get rid of those things. I can say names.remove and do quote Laura, and now when I run it again, I see the same thing where I have the name, the list, I added a name, and then I removed it. And if I don't want that to be Laura, I want that to be, we'll do Gus this time. I have the 5 there and then remove 1 and I'm back to the 4. So multiple ways we can remove, we can create a variable called Laura and I can remove that variable. I can, however I want to do this. Now, moving forward, we can also do things like sort. So I want to say, instead I will say right here, instead of remove, I'm going to sort. So I'm going to do names dot sort and run this again. And now it went from the order I created it to sort it alphabetically, and we can sort numerically. I can also temporarily display I can temporarily change the order of the list, so I can display it. I can reverse the list. I can display the length of the list. That's an interesting one. So when I do len and I put names in here, what happens, as you can see, is I have the length of that the length of the list, so that tells me how many entries are in the list. That can be really useful for us, and we'll use that later on in one of the labs that we have. So here's a lab that we have, not technically lab 8, but that's what we used. We're going to create 2 lists. One list will have 4 movie characters, one list will have 4 employee IDs, and then we're going to add 1 more character, 1 more ID. And we're going to have these 2 lists. So then we're going to use a variable as the index. So if we say x equals 0, it's going to print out the first thing in the list, in each list. Then we're going to change the index variable and print that out again. So we'll repeat the process to print out all of them. So give that a try, and I'll pause for a second. Okay, and we're ready to get started, and just to simplify things, I deleted everything. I left my names here. These are going to be my employee names. Those are going to be, they're not movie characters, but they'll work for what we want. So the next up is employee underscore ID, and I need that to be equal to, and I'm going to put 1, 2, just to keep things simple, I'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. And now what I'm going to do is, before I add another character, I'm going to make sure things work. So I'm going to say x equals, start with the first one there. I'm going to do x equals 0. And now I'm going to try to print something out. I'm going to print, and I want to figure out what I want to print. I want to print out my first. I need to print out something that says employee. So I'm going to do employee colon, and I'm going to close my quote, and I'm going to add my name. So I'm going to do names, and my positional indicator is going to be an X, because that is whatever variable I have there. X equals 0 in this case. Then I'm going to add in my the term employee ID. So I'll do a quote, and we can talk about tabs another time, but I'm just going to do some spaces and say employee underscore employee ID, and I'll put a colon and give, and then close my quote, plus, and now I could type employee ID underscore ID and my index. But if you remember from last video, that's going to be a number. That's going to be an integer. And everything else is a string, so it won't be able to add it together properly. So I need to actually convert it to a string with the str command. And I have a parenthesis that closes the str, opens it and closes it, and then closes my whole print command. And if I did this right, I can hit F5 and I get employee Rob, employee ID 1. And if I go back to my program and run it again, I can change that from a 0 to, let's say, a 2, run that again, and employee Millie and employee ID is 3. So we've done that part, and that part works. The next thing we need to do is add an employee, and I'll just keep working down this list, even though theoretically you might want to put this up here. I'm going to add my ID. I'm going to say names dot append, and I'll put my name in here, and I can do, I'll stick with Laura because that was what I used before, and then I can do names dot append, employee dot append. Now in the real world this might not be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but in our world that's what we're using. So now I will say x equals 4, and because the fifth position is number 4, and then I can copy that, and I'm going to paste this here, and if everything works right, it should print out Laura and employee 5. And unexpected indent. Oh, Python uses indentation, and I made a mistake when I typed that and indented. So now I fix that, and let's try to do more mistakes. Employee is not the variable employee underscore ID. These things happen. Sometimes they get edited out of videos, sometimes they don't. So I've already made a few mistakes that it was easier to edit out and try to explain. The whole point here is not to prove that I'm good at this. The whole point is to show you a process and have you understand how to do it yourself. So in this case, mistakes happen. In other cases where I edited it out, it was to clean things up. So I repeated the process. I could say, you know what, I want to make sure I've printed out all of the employee names. I'm going to just do this, copy that, paste, 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 and all I have to do is, let's see, I've done 2, I've done 4, I will do 0, 1, and 3. And now when I run it, I get all of those names, all of the employees, and in the order I printed them out here. It might look weird that I'm printing 3, 5, 1, 2, 4, but that's just what I happen to do. I could certainly change the order of that. So that's the basics of lists. We just create a list of things, and we can do different things with that list of things. And in the next video, we'll get into like more efficient ways of doing things with that list, rather than just repeating the command again and doing an x equals 2, x equals 3, x equals 7, whatever. We'll get more efficient in using lists and more computer oriented, instead of just this that we've done here. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.